Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you know when live we go. Hello everyone, welcome to today's DNS session. We are going to take up Science and Tech section from today's newspaper and Indian Express Explain articles from last week. There is an article on the Science and Tech page of today's newspaper, W boson mass less than expected. In the CDF experiment, Collider Detector at Fermilab experiment, physicists have found that an elementary particle called as W boson appears to be 0.1% too heavy compared to the theoretical calculation coming from the standard model. And this tiny discrepancy is too much to be explained from any theoretical principle. The experiments carried out in the Fermilab have very high accuracy, and this result is of decades of experiments, and this 0.1% of discrepancy is just too much. See, when you are dealing with fundamental particle of masses billions and trillions smaller than electron, on that level, accuracy is extremely high, and that is why the sophisticated experimental setup of the Fermilab gives out very high accuracy. So, with this very high discrepancy in the mass, the question is, are we missing on any fundamental particle? See, the standard model gives out equations concerning all the known fundamental particles and forces and explaining their relation. The standard model predicts W boson, and we'll discuss in a short while what this W boson is and what in general bosons are. But the model predicts W boson to be linked with top quarks and Higgs boson. These terms might sound new to you, but trust me, we'll only do what is important for the exam. So W boson is linked or interacts with top quarks and Higgs boson. Top quarks is a type of quarks. But this discrepancy cannot be explained with interaction of these two fundamental particles. So if the experimental result is independently verified by other laboratory experiments, then we may be at the verge of finding a new particle. And hence, beginning of new particle physics theory may emerge. From the exam perspective, we have to have fundamental idea of the standard model. See, standard model is of particle physics explaining the known fundamental forces and the known fundamental particles of the universe. But here is a catch. The fundamental forces which are known in universe are electromagnetic, weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force, and gravitational force. But for the reason that I'll tell you very shortly, gravitational force or gravity is not considered to be a force under standard model. So the model does not recognize this as a force. So when we say that it establishes equation linking all the known forces and all known elementary particles, gravity is omitted. But physicists have had long urge to just dismantle this standard model because it has been known very well that standard model does not explain everything. For example, the gravitational force. The theory of gravitation, as is described by the general relativity theory, is not explained by the standard model. You already know that universe is continuously accelerating and expanding, which is possibly explained by dark energy, but this is not explained by standard model. Standard model also does not explain the existence of dark matter. Then there are other things, for example, the neutrino oscillation and their non-zero masses. These things are not explained by the standard model. You just have to have very rudimentary idea like this. We will not get into the detail at all. But what you have to remember on the technical point is that standard model considers three elementary particles in nature: quarks, leptons, and bosons. And you need to have general idea on these three fundamental particles: quarks, leptons, bosons. In 2017, UPSC has asked this question. The terms event horizon, singularity, string theory, and standard model are sometimes seen in news in the context of. The answer obviously is option A, observation and understanding of the universe. Event horizon, singularity, these are related with black holes. String theory gives us understanding of the universe, interaction of different fundamental particles, and so does the standard model. Now you must know this, if UPSC has asked a rudimentary question once, they ask advanced questions on the same things later. Questions on black holes have been asked again and again. So it will not be a surprise if they ask a little more advanced thing on standard model. According to standard model, there are three fundamental particles: quarks, leptons, and bosons. Quarks forms hadrons. Hadrons are protons and neutrons. Protons and neutrons, as you would know, forms the constituents of nuclei. Quarks have fractional charge. Every matter has an antimatter, so quarks have antiquarks. There are 6 kinds of quarks and hence 6 kinds of antiquarks. Regarding quarks, there is one thing if we have to remember, that is this. Quarks and antiquarks are the only 2 fundamental particles that interact through all 4 fundamental forces of nature: electromagnetic force, strong and weak nuclear force, and gravitational force. As you know that protons and electrons are confined within the nucleus because that is the general nature of quark. Quark exhibits confinement. They are not observed independently, but they are always observed in combination with other quarks. Leptons are also fundamental elementary particles as per the standard model, and they are also of 6 types, just like quarks, but they do not have fractional charge. Electron, for example, is a lepton, and you know that electrons do not have fractional charge. They have -1 unit of charge. Electrons, muons, tau, they are 3 kinds of leptons, and the other 3 are 3 kinds of neutrinos. So you must remember, neutrinos are also leptons. Muon is of particular interest because muon G2 experiment is also making round in news, which you must have heard and read of. We will discuss this as well very shortly. The third kind of elementary particle as per the standard model is boson. Bosons are generally thought to be particles responsible for all physical forces. But it's not just the force, it is also the mass that comes through bosons. Bosons have been named after Indian scientist Professor Satyendranath Bose. In the beginning, I have told you that standard model does not recognize gravity as force because force comes through boson, and the boson corresponding to gravity has not been discovered yet. So gravity yet is not considered as a force under standard model because force comes from boson, and the bosons responsible for electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force exist. But we do not know of a boson that give rise to gravitational force, so it is not considered as a force. Rather, gravity is alternatively explained by the standard model, not considering it as a force. So some elementary bosons like gluons, they are force carriers. They give rise to force between particles. And there is one boson called as Higgs boson. It gives rise to the phenomena of mass. Hence, it is also termed as the God particle because the existence of universe in the manner and the way that we see and perceive because of mass, that is because of Higgs boson. And there are various other kinds of bosons as well. For example, mesons. Photon is also a boson, and there are W and Z bosons. In the last 2-3 decades, much of the experiment has been done on W boson. You must know about W and Z bosons that they mediate weak force. You know there are 4 fundamental forces in universe: gravitational force, electromagnetic force, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. This weak force is that weak nuclear force. But unlike the other 3, weak force is not a push or pull force, but it is a force that transforms heavier particles into lighter ones. So W bosons are actually responsible for subatomic shifting of elementary particles. For instance, muons, they transform into W boson and neutrino. And W boson in turn transform into electron and emits neutrino again. So gradually you see the particles are getting heavier from muon to W boson to electron. So bosons in general are responsible for production of force or attainment of mass. But W boson is responsible for a kind of force, but that is not the kind of fundamental force that we know of or perceive as a kind of push or pull force, but it's a force that transforms particles successively into heavier ones. And this effectively is important for radioactivity phenomena, which happens in the sun, which is the ultimate source of energy for the entire solar system. Muons, as we have seen previously, is a kind of lepton, and this is also of special interest because recently experiment has been carried out with the name of muon G2 experiment. Muon is a heavier cousin of electron, and the theoretical value of the magnetic moment of muon as coming from the standard model is very close to 2. So in the muon G2 experiment, muon is a fundamental particle, it's a kind of lepton, you understand. G here stands for the magnetic moment. And the value of this magnetic moment is very close to 2, and hence the name of the experiment, Muon G2 experiment. The theoretical calculation as per the standard model is 2.00233 and the number goes on till more decimals. But there was slight discrepancy from this theoretical value in the experimental result, and the error was in the 8th decimal. You see the accuracy with which these experiments are carried out. And this is too much to bear. Either the experimental result is incorrect or there got to be some particle which has got attached with this muon, and we are not actually measuring the magnetic moment of just muon. But there is no such elementary particle that the standard model offers that explains this discrepancy. And hence it was expected that there must exist some undiscovered elementary particles. And the excitement in the scientific community was that we may be at the verge of discovering something that constitutes dark matter. Previously, this experiment, muon G2, has been carried out, and now the CDF experiment, and previously in 2017, just like CDF experiment as we have been talking about, Atlas experiment has been carried out, and both shows discrepancy in the mass of W boson. Although it could be little early, there could be some experimental error as well, but the diligence with which these experiments are carried out, there were approximately 400 scientists involved in this one particular experiment. The chances that there are experimental errors is less. Given the background that the standard model does not explain everything, there got to be some other better model, succeeding standard model that will explain everything, including gravitation, including dark energy, dark matter, including the oscillation of neutrinos. That is why the experimental result of Atlas, CDF, and muon G2 experiment has been telling us that we may be at verge of finding something new, something beyond the standard model. That would be sufficient for our examination perspective. More theoretical discussion will go beyond the demand of the exam. Now we shall take up this explain article, State of Denotified Tribes and Why House Panel is Critical About a Program for Their Development. See, recently a standing committee of Parliament has criticized the functioning of the development program for denotified, nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes. The budgetary outlay for the economic empowerment of denotified tribes was Rs 200 crore for a period of 5 years beginning from 2021-22. But not even a single rupee was utilized in the first year. Since the prelims exam is just around the corner, we'll cover this article and the subsequent articles only from the perspective of prelims exam. See, certain communities were notified as born criminals by the British regime through series of legislation beginning from Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. And subsequently, they had many legislation right up till 1947. On the recommendation of Anantha Sayanam Iyengar Committee that was constituted in 1949, Government of India denotified these tribes in 1952, and hence the name Denotified Tribes. Denotified tribes meaning they were earlier notified as born criminals, for the reason that they dwelled in the forest areas and according to the British regime, they were harming the natural resources. According to Renke Commission, roughly 10% of population of India is denotified and nomadic as per the census of 2001. Many of the denotified tribes, they are nomadic or semi-nomadic, so all these three goes together. Denotified, nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes. Nomadic and semi-nomadic, as the name suggests, they are the one always on the move. They keep moving from one place to another rather than having a settled habitat. There are many issues concerning denotified, nomadic and semi-nomadic tribes. First and foremost, there is no constitutional support for these tribes. The Ideate Commission had said that it's an irony that the constitutional fathers failed to recognize these communities in the constitution itself. So they don't have the constitutional support like the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. But many of the nomadic, semi-nomadic and denotified tribes comes under SC, ST and OBC. But many of them are not categorized into these categories. And because they don't have constitutional support or recognition or categorization by the government, there is no permanent commission for these communities. And because of their political quietness, administration concerning these tribes is very lax. As noted earlier, no money was spent in the year 2021-22 that was earmarked for the economic empowerment of these communities. Denotified tribes, many of them are of the nature of nomadic and semi-nomadic, So they don't own private land or they do not have any home ownership. And the functioning of Development and Welfare Board for denotified nomadic and semi-nomadic communities is far from satisfactory. This board was constituted in 2019. Government of India, although has taken many measures for the welfare of these communities right after independence, beginning from their denotification, but since they are not politically very vocal, welfare of these communities have not been very substantial. In 2006, Government of India instituted National Commission for Denotified Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Tribes. It is also known as Renke Commission, and Renke Commission did extraordinary work in identification of semi-nomadic, nomadic, and denotified tribes, estimation of their numbers, and identification of number of communities of these class. Government of India started a scheme called as SEED, Scheme for Economic Empowerment of Denotified Tribe Communities. It's a scheme with bundle of facilities like health insurance, facilitating livelihood, financial assistance for construction of their homes, also assistance related with education and coaching. In 2015, again, National Commission for Denotified Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Tribes were constituted. This was chaired by Bhiku Ramji Idate. This is famously called as Idate Commission. The commission submitted its report in 2018. An IDATE commission recommended for the setting up of permanent commission for these communities. And based on this recommendation, Development and the Welfare Board for Denotified Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Communities has been constituted in 2019. It has been formed under Societies Registration Act 1860, under the aegis of Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Presently, Niti Aayog is in the process of identification of various communities under this category. Anthropological Survey of India is presently conducting ethnographic studies of denotified communities. And Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment is implementing two important schemes for denotified tribes. One is called as Dr. Ambedkar Pre-Matric and Post-Matric Scholarship for DNTs. It's a centrally sponsored scheme for the welfare of denotified tribe students who are not covered under any SC, ST or OBC programs. And there's another scheme called as Nanaji Deshmukh Scheme for construction of hostels for DNT boys and girls. So much of information will suffice for this topic for the coming prelims exam. There appeared in the Indian Express an explained article why Centre has opposed Odisha's plan for landmark Lingaraj Temple. Odisha has planned to develop the complex of Lingaraj Temple and other heritage sites in Odisha, and for this Odisha took an ordinance route. But the central government has opposed the move, saying that the ordinance to bring this landmark 11th century Lingaraj Temple and its associated temples under a special law of the state government is outside the legislative competence of the state legislature, because it comes in conflict with Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act 1958. Via Lingaraj Temple Ordinance 2020, Odisha government aims to manage the rituals and other activities of the temple and other 8 associated temples. The ordinance has put out a Kamra Kshetra development plan of 66 acre. There are some infrastructure development plan like road development, Lingaraj entry plaza, parking space, e-auto project, among others. And most importantly, the ordinance proposed the formation of Lingaraj Temple Managing Committee to look into the day-to-day affairs of the shrine. But the central government is of the opinion that the state government has violated the Ancient Monument and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act. Because Odisha government has already developed modern structures around the Lingaraj Temple, and the ordinance covers 12 centrally protected monuments, and also has brought into the purview of the state government 3 tanks. There's a clause in the ordinance that gives certain power to the temple committee to undertake the work of repair. But repairing centrally protected monument is the job of Archaeological Survey of India. So there will be some conflict of role. From the perspective of coming prelims examination, these things are not very important because it's still a legal matter that is yet to be settled. But you should be generally aware of the Lingaraj Temple. Let's jot down the points which are important regarding Lingaraj Temple from the perspective of Civil Service Prelims examination. First of all, Lingaraj Temple is dedicated to Lord Shiva. It was built by King Jajati Keshri of Shoma Vansh. The temple was constructed in the 11th century, but later addition to this temple was done by Ganga rulers. Lingaraj Temple is one of the finest examples of Kalinga style of architecture, which became popular in the region of Odisha in the eastern India. Kalinga style of architecture is classified as subcategory of Northern Temple architecture style or Nagara style. The temple is built in red stone. There is a very famous lake, Bindusara Lake, located to the north of the temple. And also there are other lakes near the temple like Marichi Kunda, Ganga Jamuna. One of the striking features of Kalinga style of architecture is the dula, the shape of the shikhara of the temple. We'll talk about it in a moment. Lingaraj temple has four components: the Vimana, which is a structure containing the sanctum; Jagmohana, the assembly hall; Nata Mandira, the festival hall; and Bhoga Mandapa, the offering hall. Kalinga architecture, as we have just talked about, has two features, characteristics by which the temples are classified. One is the shape of tower and the other is the hall. The tower, the shikhara of the temple, is called as Dula and the hall is called as Jagmohan. As you can see from this picture, both the tower and the hall, they are intricately carved. It is lavishly sculpted. But it is the shape of the Dula, the shikhara, that gives three distinct types of temple in Kalinga architecture. Accordingly, the temples in Kalinga architecture are classified as Rekha Dula, Pidha Dula, and Khakra Dula. If the shape of the shikhara is like this, it is towering big, it is called as Rekha Dula. If the shape of the shikhara is like this, which is pyramidal in shape, it is called as Pidha Dula. And this is the shape of the shikhara, which makes the temple called as Khakra Dula. The beautiful sun temple of Konark, if you see the shape of shikhara, it is pyramidal. So this is a Pidha Dula temple. If you can guess which temple is this is Jagmohan temple of Odisha. And you can easily identify this part of the temple is Rekha Dula. These two are pyramidal in shape, these are Pidha Dula. And this is Khakra Dula. In the Lingaraj temple, you will find Rekha Dula and Pidha Dula. Rekha Dula and Pidha Dula, they are mostly for Lord Vishnu, Surya and Shiva. Khakra Dula is mostly associated with Chamunda and Durga temples. Also, the Rekha Dula and Khakra Dula, they houses the sanctum, while the Pidha Dula mostly they constitute the outer dancing and the offering halls. There is an explained article, Indonesia's palm oil crisis and its implication for India. Indonesia is the largest producer of palm oil. 60% of global palm oil production comes from Indonesia. The second largest producer of palm oil is Malaysia. But recently there has been internal shortage of palm oil in Indonesia. The reasons are many. First of all, there is a price cap in the domestic market and the international market is offering better price for the reason of Ukraine-Russia war and also because of dry weather condition in Brazil, Argentina and Paraguay, which has resulted in deficit edible oil supply in terms of sunflower oil and soya oil. So there has been increased demand of palm oil in the international market. Additionally, because of the domestic policy of Indonesia to blend 30% of its domestic palm oil with diesel, more shortage of palm oil internally has been experienced. But you have to know things regarding palm oil with regard to India. See, India is the largest consumer of vegetable oil in the world. And India imports 60% of its requirement of edible oils. And palm oil constitutes 60% of the imported edible oils. And of the imported palm oils, 54% comes from Indonesia and Malaysia. Around 94% of the palm oil in India is used for food products. So the economic value of palm oil for India is very high. Government of India initiated Technology Mission on Oilseeds in 1986. This got converted into National Mission on Oilseeds and Palm Oil in 2014. And further, it was merged into National Food Security Mission. For production of edible oils in general, Government of India has started Yellow Revolution. And in August last year, Government of India announced National Edible Oil Mission, Oil Palm. This scheme is for self-reliance in edible oil with substantial allocation of 11,000 crore for the period of 5 years. There is also a Kharif Strategy 2021 for oil seeds. The target is to increase the area under the oil seeds. And recently, Government of India has brought down the rate of import duty to 0% on crude palm oil, also crude soybean oil and crude sunflower oil. This provision has been made for till September 2022. Also, the Agri cess, the Agriculture Infrastructure Development cess for crude palm oil has been brought down from 7.5% to 5%. So the gap for agri cess and the import duty for crude palm oil and refined palm oil has been increased. This will encourage domestic palm oil refining industry, which in turn will encourage the domestic production of palm oils. The problem concerning the palm oil industry in India are many. On the basic level, the problem is of quality seed availability. The problem is also of technological adoption. For instance, genetically modified oil seeds, these are globally accepted, but we have not started on them yet. The problem is also of policy. Indian farmers do grow oil seeds as per the domestic market demand, but when there is a bumper production, the prices fall, and the farmers are not rescued by the government. Indian farmers have been growing groundnut and sunflower for years, but because of erratic rainfall and difficulty in pest control, they have given it up for soybean. The adoption of micro irrigation technique is also very low. So leaving things on the market force has not really worked out for edible oil industry in India. Now you have in front of you speed test. There are 14 statements of the nature of true or false. Please attempt this test with a time limit of 3 minutes. Don't exceed the time limit, take the test seriously, mark your answer, then listen to the discussion, and then calculate your score, post it in the comment section, and have some fruitful discussion. Statement 1. Collider detector at Fermilab experiment and Atlas experiment are related to neutrinos. It's an incorrect statement, of course, because the experiments are related to W bosons. Standard model does not explain the theory of gravitation as described by general relativity theory of Einstein. This is absolutely correct statement. Standard model does not recognize gravity as a force at all because the bosons concerning gravitation has not been discovered, and bosons are responsible for establishment of force between the fundamental or elementary particles. According to the standard model, elementary particles in nature are quarks, leptons, bosons, and fermions. This fermion is in addition to the list. There are three elementary particles: quarks, leptons, and bosons. Fermions are basically general matters at the macroscopic level. So the statement is incorrect. Muon G2 experiment, recently in news, is a groundbreaking experiment that has discovered a new particle that may be constituent of dark matter. We as of today do not know what is the constituent of dark matter. And Muon G2 experiment has not given any conclusive conclusion. Muon G2 experiment, remember, has not concluded on a new particle. It's just a hint, and the experimental result also needs to be verified independently by other laboratory experiments. There could be experimental error, and there is also a possibility of explaining the result alternatively through standard model theory itself. So existence of no new particle has been concluded yet. Statement 5. Higgs boson gives rise to phenomena of mass and force. Hence it is called as God particle. We have seen our discussion in the beginning that bosons gives rise to force. There are some elementary bosons which are responsible for establishment of force between the elementary particles. And Higgs boson is the boson which is responsible for the phenomena of mass. Higgs boson is not responsible for both force and mass, but it is responsible for the phenomena of mass, and the matter as we see in the universe, as we perceive it, is created because of Higgs boson. And this was predicted by the standard model, and this has been proven to exist in the year 2012. And because of this reason that the phenomena of mass emerges out of Higgs boson, it is termed as God particle. But Higgs boson gives rise only to mass, not to force. Weak force transforms heavier particle into lighter ones. This is absolutely correct. Weak force is not like other force, strong force or electromagnetic force or gravitational force. It is not about interaction between particles, rather it is transformation of one particle to another. Like muon gets transformed into W boson and W boson gets transformed into electron with emission of neutrino. That phenomena is caused by weak force. Mutation in virus naturally occurs as a result of multiplication. This statement is absolutely true. You must already know this. There's an article in today's newspaper. It is difficult to diagnose the XE variant. Previously in the DNS, we have covered XE variant. The formation of these variants, XT variant and XE variant, and the series will go on, and also the formation of mutation like Delta variant, these are the natural byproduct of multiplication of virus. You know that virus does not have its own multiplication reproductive machinery, it uses the machinery of the host cell. But in the host cell, when the division of its nuclear material happens, there are natural processes that detects and corrects the error in the multiplication. That error detection and correction facility of the host cell is not available to the virus. Virus can only hack the system so much that it can only multiply its genetic material. That sophistication of error detection and correction is not there. So naturally error will happen. And when the error happens, mutation happens. So the virus keeps mutating. It cannot be stopped from mutating. And this is why mRNA based vaccines are promoted, because it's easier to develop new vaccine for a mutated virus. Renke and IDate commissions are linked with denotified tribes. This is absolutely correct. These are two very important commissions concerning denotified tribes that we have to remember. Criminal Tribes Act of 1871 was repealed in 1949 and notified tribes were denotified. See, the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871 notified certain tribes as born criminals. Later, after independence, they were denotified and hence the name Denotified Tribes. But we have to remember the year, it's very important. It was not 1949, it was 1952. Development and Welfare Board for Denotified Nomadic and Semi-Nomadic Communities is headed by Social Justice and Empowerment Minister. Mr. Idate, who headed the Idate Commission, is the present chairman of this board. So it is not headed by the minister, rather it can be headed by a suitable person as nominated by the government. Statement is incorrect. Soya bean is the highest produced oilseed in India. Because of erratic weather, because of difficulty in pest control, because of less adoption of technology, it's true that soya bean is the highest produced oilseed in India. The quantity of imported edible oils is more than the domestic production of edible oils in the last 5 years. We have seen in our discussion that roughly 60% of the requirement is imported. The statement is true. The government does not impose any custom duty on all the imported edible oils as a special case. Zero import duty is for some edible oils, and that too crude, not refined. The statement is false. Kailashnath Temple was built before Lingaraj Temple. Kailashnath Temple was built in 7th century, although some work was also carried out in 8th century, but Lingaraj Temple was built in 11th century. So the statement absolutely is true. So how much did you get? Now you have in front of you answer to yesterday's question of the day and today's question of the day. Attempt the question, post your answer in the comment section. Also try to attempt the DNS quiz on the eLearn platform. Goodbye. Take care.